Chapter 5. Mysterious Lovers. At home, she told Nancy all about the wonderful things hidden in the carved box. She told her how angry he seemed to be, and then how he wanted her to visit him more often because she reminded him of somebody else. "Who was it? Who do you remind him of?" Nancy interrupted. "I don't know." "A mystery. Oh, Miss Pollyanna, it's just like in a book. So tell me everything. John Pendleton wasn't that nice to you until he was told you were Miss Harrington's niece?" "Yes, I told him about this last time, and today he sent for me and wants me to visit him more often." I know, Nancy said triumphantly. She didn't want him to think the jelly was from her. You remind him of someone. Now listen, Mr. Pendleton was Miss Harrington's lover. But Nancy, it couldn't be true. She doesn't like him. Of course, that's the whole point. They had an argument over something, and they couldn't make up after that. Old Tom told me Miss Harrington wasn't always the way she is, but she became like that after a quarrel with her lover. But he didn't want to tell me who it was. Now I know. But Nancy, if they loved each other once, they have to make up, Pollyanna suggested. Miss Pollyanna, you do not know much about lovers. You're not old enough. Pollyanna said nothing, but she went to her room thinking how glad they would be to be lovers again. Ever since that day, she began spending lots of time at Mr. Pendleton's house. He showed her many astonishing things, and once he showed her prisms, small pieces of glass put on strings in the sunlight that let out many colors and created a rainbow. Pollyanna was delighted to see the dancing rainbows, as she called it. "Oh, how I wish I had lots of these things to show to everyone I know. It would be so much easier to play the game if you could have a rainbow dancing for you. They all would be so glad. Maybe I can make my aunt play the game." As Mr. Pendleton hadn't heard of the game before, Pollyanna told him about it this time, and he gladly allowed her to take some of the prisms to give away to other people in town. "You are like a prism yourself, Pollyanna," he said. Soon the summer was over, and Pollyanna had to go to school. She was willing to learn, and she quickly discovered that attending classes was also some kind of living, not just a duty. Her free time, though, was somewhat shorter, and during one of her visits to Mr. Pendleton's, he asked her, "I don't see you that often now. Maybe you could live with me. You could help me play the game." "But you're not serious. I'm Aunt Polly's," Pollyanna laughed, taking his words for a joke. "If she let you, would you stay with me?" he asked seriously. "But she is so good to me." Pollyanna wasn't sure what to say. "Pollyanna, I used to love somebody years ago, and I hoped to bring her to my home, but it didn't work out that way for me. It just didn't. Since then, this place has never become a home. It takes a woman's hand and heart or a child's presence to make a home, Pollyanna, and I have not had either. Would you like to join me in this house and make this place a home?" "So, Mr. Pendleton, you long for a woman's hand and heart?" Pollyanna seemed to be excited. "Well, yes." "Oh, I'm so glad. Now you can take us both, and everything will be lovely." "Both?" "Yes, me and Aunt Polly. Well, she isn't won over yet, but—" "Aunt Polly? Here?" Mr. Pendleton cried in horror. "What are you talking about?" he asked her after he had calmed down. "I thought you wanted Aunt Polly's hand and heart, and me as a child." Their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of Dr. Chilton, but before the girl left, Mr. Pendleton managed to ask her not to mention anything they had been talking about to anyone. The next day, Dr. Chilton came to Miss Harrington's house looking for Pollyanna, as Mr. Pendleton wanted to talk to her. "I know why he wants to see me," she said joyously. "I wasn't meant to tell anyone, but you're his doctor. I can tell you. It's about him and my Aunt Polly. Nancy and I figured out they were lovers, but my aunt doesn't know anything yet, and I guess that is why he wants to see me." "Oh, I'm sure he wants to talk to you," Dr. Chilton said with a strange smile. As soon as Pollyanna arrived, John Pendleton immediately asked her a question without even greeting her first. "What did you mean, my child, about me taking you both, you and Aunt Polly?" "Well, you were lovers, and you said you wanted to have a woman's heart and—" "Polly Harrington and I? Lovers?" Pollyanna opened her eyes widely at the obvious surprise in Pendleton's voice. So you and Aunt Polly? Never. And you don't want her to come live with you? No. And I assume that if your aunt isn't moving in with me, you aren't coming either. I can't. I'm Aunt Polly's, she answered quietly. Pollyanna, before you became Aunt Polly's, you were your mother's. And I loved your mother very much, but she loved your father. This is what happened. I don't love anyone like her anymore. Why can't you stay with me? But there's Aunt Polly. How can I be glad about anything without having you beside me? I'd beg you to ask her whether she would allow you to live with me. I will, Pollyanna sighed. I hope you didn't mention anything about this to anyone. Oh, no, no one but Dr. Chilton. Not Dr. Chilton, not him. What did he say? Oh, nothing special. I remember he said he knew why you wanted to see me, Pollyanna answered, watching in surprise because Mr. Pendleton gave a little laugh. When Pollyanna was back in her little room, she spent a long time thinking how to refuse Mr. Pendleton. She liked him a lot, but she loved her aunt and felt at home there, even though her aunt was a bit too dutiful sometimes. Suddenly she realized something, and jumped to her feet and ran towards his house. When he saw her, he asked, So, Pollyanna, are you going to live with me and help me play the glad game? No, but I have an idea what sort of thing you can do to make you glad. Did your aunt forbid you to live with me? I didn't ask her, the girl replied miserably. Pollyanna, I didn't have to. I know now that she needs me. She cares for me. But if you want to have a home, you need a child's presence. You said so yourself. You can take Jimmy Bean then. He's looking for a home, and he can work, and he is really nice. Who are you talking about? You don't mean I take some strange boy. Actually, I thought you could. Pollyanna, I suspect you're right, he surrendered. A nice little boy would be better than no one. Would you tell me something more about him? It's so great. I'm sure you will like him. And he wants to have a real home. And so Pollyanna told Jimmy's story. Chapter 6. The Accident. Besides visiting Mr. Pendleton, Pollyanna still had time to go by and see Mrs. Snow. Once she asked Pollyanna to go to Dr. Chilton's office and get some prescribed medicine. The girl obediently did as she was asked, and she did it even more willingly as she liked Dr. Chilton very much. Is this your home, doctor? She asked him, entering the office. Oh, yes, it's more an office than a home, really, I suppose. You need a woman's heart or child's presence to make it a home, too? Dr. Chilton looked puzzled. Why do you think so? Oh, Mr. Pendleton told me so. And you know, it wasn't about Aunt Polly. They weren't lovers. It was my mother he loved. But why don't you get a woman's heart for yourself? Oh, it is not that easy to find, my child. But you don't mean that you've never tried? Pollyanna was curious. Never mind, my dear, never mind. Don't worry about others, he answered her, looking as if his thoughts were somewhere else that moment. Soon after that, the accident happened. Pollyanna was coming back from school, and while crossing the road, a motor car approached and hit her. Nobody could say what had really happened and who was to blame for it, but it came as a shock to everyone. Miss Harrington's doctor was at the house as quickly as possible. Soon there was a nurse as well to take care of the little patient. Is she badly hurt? Old Tom asked Nancy. They can't tell yet, Nancy said, almost crying. She's unconscious. Miss Polly spends all day and night with her and listens to her heartbeat. She doesn't treat her as a duty anymore. Where was she hurt? They know nothing yet. They say she might be hurt internally. Pollyanna became conscious the next day. What's the matter, Aunt Polly? She asked immediately. Why can't I get up? Am I sick? Don't worry, my dear. You were hit yesterday by an automobile. You have to stay in bed for a couple more days. Just rest now. Aunt Polly couldn't say more, as her throat was tight and she could hardly speak. Oh, yes, I was running. I remember now. But I feel weird now, as if I couldn't move my legs, as if I couldn't feel them at all. Aunt Polly's face became as white as paper, but the nurse came to her rescue. Maybe I should talk to you now. I'm Miss Hunt, and I'm your nurse for the time being to help your aunt take care of you. I need you to take these pills for me. But I don't need to be taken care of. I have to go to school tomorrow, Pollyanna protested. Don't worry. The doctor will examine you, and he will tell you when you will be able to go back to school. You need to be obedient now and take these pills, will you? Pollyanna followed the nurse's orders and soon fell asleep. She was unable to go to school for the next couple of days, and the days soon became weeks. I'm glad I was hurt, but I'm not sick, she kept repeating to her aunt and everyone else. Glad? Yes, if I were sick, it would force me to stay in bed like Mrs. Snow, but I have broken legs, and they will heal. Miss Polly stood up after hearing these words and left the room. Downstairs she saw John Pendleton, waiting to ask how Pollyanna was feeling. At the same time, Nancy told old Tom about Pendleton visiting their house. He came here personally. I used to think they were lovers, he and Miss Polly. I know now it was never true, but I know they do not like each other. Yet he came to ask about our little girl. I came to ask about Pollyanna, John Pendleton said. She's the same so far, Polly Harrington answered with a quick look of pain crossing her face. And how is that? Can't you tell me anything? I wish I could tell you. So you don't know? What do the doctors say? Dr. Warren has arranged a meeting with a specialist from New York. We're waiting for him. But what is her condition right now? There were only small injuries, a cut on the head, a couple of bruises, but there is also an internal injury of the spine. She seems to be paralyzed from the hips down. What does she say about this? He asked after a moment. How is she handling this? She doesn't know. She thinks her legs are broken. She said she is glad of having broken legs instead of being a lifelong invalid like Mrs. Snow. Miss Harrington shook as she told them this. I wonder if you know how fond of Pollyanna I am. I wanted to convince her to live with me, but she wouldn't leave you. She said you were so good to her. He couldn't look her straight in the eye. Thank you, Mr. Pendleton. I'll let Pollyanna know you were here, asking about her, and when I get any more information, I will let you know. Days passed. Miss Polly came into Pollyanna's room and told her that they want her to be seen by another doctor. Dr. Chilton, how wonderful, she replied joyously. Oh, no, dear, I don't mean Dr. Chilton. Oh, but he cured the broken leg of Mr. Pendleton. Why can't he examine me? Aunt Polly, if you don't mind, I would like to have Dr. Chilton. But I do mind, my child. It will be a specialist from New York who will come to see you. Miss Harrington was very strict about this. But Aunt Polly, if you love Dr. Chilton... What? If you're sick, Pollyanna explained, and you love your doctor, it will help the healing, and I love Dr. Chilton. I'm very sorry, but everything has already been arranged, and the doctor is coming tomorrow. Unfortunately, the arranged meeting had to be postponed due to a last-minute telegram from New York. Even though Pollyanna tried once again to convince her aunt to invite Dr. Chilton, she didn't succeed. The appointment was rescheduled, and the medical examination went smoothly, but then something terrible happened. It must have been the cat that left the door to Pollyanna's room open, but due to this, Pollyanna overheard the conversation between the New York specialist and her aunt. She could also hear her aunt screaming, Not that! Doctor, not that! You don't mean the child will never walk again? The minute they heard the girl crying for Aunt Polly to come see her, they realized she must have heard them, and Miss Polly fainted. The nurse ran quickly to the patient's room. I want Aunt Polly, the girl cried, pale and shaking. She can't be here right now. Can I help you? The nurse asked. No, I heard something, and I need her to tell me it isn't true. Miss Hunt, you heard her. Is it true? Is it true? The poor girl's eyes were wide open with terror. All doctors make mistakes sometimes. Just don't think about it anymore, the nurse said, trying to calm Pollyanna down. I can't. How will I go to school? How will I visit people in town? Mrs. Snow, Mr. Pendleton. How will I ever be glad for anything? Pollyanna cried. She was given some more pills and soon fell asleep. After this, Miss Harrington sent Nancy to Mr. Pendleton to tell him what the doctor said. She doesn't know yet, right? Mr. Pendleton asked, shocked by the news. Nancy couldn't stop crying. That's the problem, sir. She does. Poor little girl. She can't think of anything to help her play the glad game. Do you know about that? Nancy asked. The glad game? Yes, I do know what this is. Can I do something to remind her about the things she should be glad about? Maybe I could tell her you were going to see and talk to Jimmy Bean. But I'm not going to do so. Why? Pendleton seemed surprised. Oh, I suppose I wanted to make her feel glad about this at least. She wanted so much to find him a home. Chapter 7. Open Window. Soon the whole town knew about the accident and how serious it was. People started to come by Miss Harrington's house sending greetings to Pollyanna and asking her aunt to tell the girl they were playing the game. Miss Polly was astonished by the number of people who knew her niece. They mainly wanted to send their best wishes to the girl, but they were also talking about how much their lives had been changed by the Glad game. Aunt Polly had no idea about the game they kept talking about. Even John Pendleton came by again with a message for the poor girl. Please tell Pollyanna that I have seen Jimmy Bean, and I am going to adopt him, he said to Miss Harrington. Are you going to adopt Jimmy Bean? She cried in shock. Yes, I think it would make Pollyanna glad if she knew. Later, when Polly Harrington told this information to her niece, she seemed to be very happy about the news. She also wanted to find out what this glad thing had to do with it, but the girl immediately stopped talking about being glad. As Polly Harrington felt as if she were being left out, she came to the kitchen and started questioning Nancy. What does this all mean, Nancy? Why does everyone say that they are playing it? They all come here to thank Pollyanna. What is this about? I tried to ask my niece, but she doesn't seem to want to tell me about it. Miss Polly looked irritated. Nancy burst into tears. It means that everyone who had the blessing of knowing her is coming now to give her a reason to be glad. It's the game her father taught her. She couldn't tell you anything about it without mentioning her father, and you forbade her to talk about him in your presence, Miss Harrington. Nancy then told the whole story about Pollyanna getting the crutches instead of a doll. The next time, when Aunt Polly was giving somebody's greetings to Pollyanna, she sounded as if she knew what the game was. Aunt Polly, her niece asked, you seem to know what the game is about. Yes, my dear, I know now. Nancy told me, and now I will be playing it with you too. Oh, Aunt Polly, I'm so glad. I always wanted to play it with you. I'm glad I can't walk now, because it led to you playing the game with me now. A couple of months passed by, and one Saturday morning Mr. Pendleton received a visit from Dr. Chilton. I've come to you because you're the only person in town who has some relations with Polly Harrington, Dr. Chilton said, sounding as if he was in a hurry. Yes? I need to see that child. It's a very important matter. I have to make an examination. You know Miss Harrington won't let me in her house. We had an argument ages ago, and now, well, it doesn't matter. I need to examine that child. That may be the only chance to make her walk again. Pollyanna? Walking? What are you saying? Mr. Pendleton asked with surprise. At the same time, Jimmy, who was now living with Mr. Pendleton, overheard the conversation, and, not waiting for more, ran towards the Harrington house. Are you sure you wanted to talk to me? Not to Pollyanna? Polly Harrington asked Jimmy. Miss Harrington, I know it's bad what I have done, but it's for Pollyanna, and I would do anything for her. I know you would, too. Well, the window was open, and I heard some parts of the conversation, and, although I didn't understand all of it, I know that Dr. Chilton needs to see Pollyanna. I know that you won't let him, but it may allow her to walk again. He knows somebody who could help her, somebody who could cure her. Polly Harrington began breathing heavily and shaking her head. Okay, Jimmy. You may go home now. I will let him see and examine Pollyanna. I just have to talk to Dr. Warren first. The next day, Dr. Warren and Dr. Chilton came into Pollyanna's room. Dr. Chilton, I'm so glad to see you. I hope my aunt won't mind. Don't worry, my dear, Aunt Polly, who also was there, said to her. Dr. Chilton is here especially for you. Aunt Polly, you were the woman's hand and heart he wanted so long ago? You were. I knew you were. I'm so glad. Soon after the examination was over, Pollyanna was told that she was to be taken to a special hospital where she would spend some time under the constant care of some of the best doctors around. About 10 months later, a letter was sent to Aunt Polly. Dear Aunt Polly and Uncle Tom, I can walk. I did 6 steps today. Everyone was watching me, and it was so good to stand on my own legs again. I wanted to sing and shout about how happy I was. I'm so happy that my accident caused you and Dr. Chilton to be back together, and I was so glad that I didn't miss the wedding. It was wonderful that you had the wedding here beside my bed so I could see it. I think about being back with you soon, and I wish I could walk all the way back. I will do 8 steps tomorrow. With lots of love to everybody, Pollyanna.